All right, everyone, welcome back from break. This is very exciting. We have the state reports to wrap off the session. We're really happy to bring back the state reports this year. We're extremely interested to hear what's all going on in each of your states. We just got a little snippet of that from the cottage food panel just a few minutes ago, so probably even much more to hear from everyone. We have 8 state programs who want to share with all of us today. So we're very mindful of your time. Each state program manager will be given 5 minutes to share an update, and then we will do 3 minutes of Q&A. So we realize this is not enough time, perhaps, for everyone to get your questions answered. So we want you to please use the chat feature in Passable and direct your questions to the presenter that you're asking. They can answer even after they have passed over the mic to the next person. Each state program manager contacts are also on the Southwest breakout page on Passable, and you can contact them directly if you would like. This session will go in alphabetical order as seen on the screen. Once it's your time, your mic will be unmuted. So I'd like to get started, and I'd like to introduce the moderator for this session, Travis Waller, the Director of Regulatory Services with the Utah Department of Agriculture and the host of 2019 Southwest Seminar. Remember, it was in person. We miss seeing all of you. Welcome, Travis.
Hi, thank you. Glad to be here. All right, so we'll just get started right away. I'd like to kind of give you a rundown on the states who will be presenting, and I'll present them individually, but as you can see, we have Arkansas, Colorado, Iowa Department of Inspection and Appeals, Kansas Department of Agriculture, Oklahoma State Department of Health, the Texas Department of State Health Services, the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, and the Utah Department of Health. So I'd like to first introduce Sherri Woodus with the Arkansas Department of Health. Sherri, are you on? All right, we'll just probably waiting for the PowerPoint to upload.
If Sherri's not on, I can take over. So, hi, this is Jeff Jackson, by the way.
Hi, Jeff. All right, we'll take it away, Jeff.
All right, so you know who we are and why we're here. So let's go to the next slide, please. So in 2020, we had some goals, right? You know, we were going to do a self-assessment and a verification audit. We were gonna, we had a preparedness grant that was gonna help us to establish some rapid response teams. Not an official one because those are manufactured foods, but one that we were developing ourselves. And then we were also gonna host this very seminar in Fayetteville, Arkansas. We had dates and we were making plans, and then everything just, you know, all went to pot when COVID hit. Next slide, please. So the reality, we were in a state of emergency. We had a statewide shutdown on March 20th of 2020. And then we started reopening slowly in phases starting in about May. We had a lot of our folks were reassigned to duties in the public health lab, contact tracing, administrative work. And a lot of those EHSs decided they were getting paid better over there, so they stayed in those programs. And then we had a lot of people that resigned due to, you know, trying to avoid the exposure of COVID-19. And then we kind of somewhat shifted our duties from previous inspections to COVID-19 compliance and enforcement, and only focused on opening new establishments and complaints for about 6 months there. We canceled our grant award, and we also canceled the seminar. And then we postponed our self-assessment, and we just completed that here recently. Next slide, please. We only did high-risk facilities that were open and operational. We did try to do some medium establishments. We gave education and guidance and support work sites that were experiencing outbreaks of COVID-19. And we also reviewed and provided compliance guidance to mass gatherings for indoor and outdoor events once we started reopening. Next slide, please. As far as other outbreaks for 2020, we had a lot of bullets flying at us, but we didn't get hit with one. So we avoided those tremendously. And so we will go to the next slide, please. We didn't have any legislative rule changes in 2020 because our legislature meets biannually and on the odd numbered years. So next slide, please. For 2021, we can go to the next slide. We did a self-assessment in August. We met standard 1, 3, and 7. We partly meet standards 2, 4, 5, and 6. And we decided we're not going to focus on standard 5 during a pandemic. Next slide, please. Our new projects and activities, we're looking for a grant and an MOA for a food safety, or we gave a grant and an MOA for food safety training to the Arkansas Hospitality Association using some CARES Act funding that greatly helped us to implement our certified food manager requirement. We actually had that requirement go into effect in 2019. Then COVID hit, so we had to delay the implementation date until July 1st of 2021. So we just kind of got started on that. And so we were glad to get that funding to help get that training out. We have new staff. We have 12 new staff. We're currently updating our policies to get conformance with the national program standards. We're looking to develop a long-term plan to meet or better conform to the standards. We're going to do a verification audit looking in 2022 after we reassess again, because we really haven't changed any of our progress from year to year. Next slide, please. We're also doing a risk factor study. We've got a University of Arkansas Medical Science master's candidate who's going to conduct that study for us. We're going to be looking at the standard. We're using all routine inspection data, and we're looking at the standard breakdown: schools, restaurants, prisons, daycares, things like that. We're also sending a lot of our staff to FD 215, 218, and the other ORAU courses since they're all virtually now. It's a lot easier for us, and so we're trying to take advantage of that when we can. Next slide, please. Legislative rule changes, we had quite a few. So we had a Meat Inspection Act that was originally with ADH, but we deferred the implementation of that to the USDA. There was a new law introduced in 2021 that would transfer that power to the Department of Ag and have them require or to begin a state meat inspection program. It was heavily sponsored by the cattle industry, and due to meat shortages in the pandemic, was heavily lobbied by Farm Bureau and the Cattlemen's Association and other organizations so heavily that basically every legislator was a co-sponsor of this bill. Next slide, please. We also had a version of the Food Freedom Act introduced. It started out similar to Wyoming's bill, as any food could be produced without a permit or inspection and allowed sales to occur virtually anywhere. But it included meat products that conflicted with the Meat Inspection Act. So we thought we had this thing killed. About a week and a half before session was over, another legislator picked it up and was going to try to run it just anything that didn't have meat. And so we were able to sit down with her and do a little negotiating, and we got it limited to only non-TCS foods. But she really wanted acidified foods like salsa and pickles in there. And so we do have some requirements of pH controls and testing that they've got to meet. And then we also added in there that those foods can't be used in a restaurant for sale. Next slide, please. 2021 outbreaks. I forgot about one, so it didn't make the list. We did have a norovirus outbreak in a correctional facility. It was 94 cases. Unfortunately, due to the type of facility, it was really difficult to determine whether or not it was foodborne or it was just something that was spreading through the community. We also responded to a nationwide outbreak of E. coli 15787, which if I remember correctly, we had like 18 cases, and it was linked to, well, it was suspected to be linked to lettuce. And so we went to several establishments trying to find the lettuce and track that down. But ultimately, the outbreak was ended before we could really ever determine what the cause was. Next slide, please. That is the end. Thank you all very much.
Perfect timing. Thank you, Jeff. Do you guys have any questions for Jeff directly?
Please put those questions in chat if you do. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next.
All right. And I'd just like to mention that looks like a lot of the similar things happen in our state as far as, shifting gears to inspect for COVID and also the meat aspect, the shortages. So thanks, Jeff, for that update. So next up, we have Troy Huffman with the Colorado Department of Health. Troy, once we get your presentation uploaded here, we'll have you take it away.
I don't have a presentation, so it's already uploaded.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
We're all good. So really excited about some of the things that we've had happen in Colorado since the last time we had a chance to meet in 2019. One of the things our legislature did, we approached them last fall and asked, due to the hardships that were placed on all of the restaurants in Colorado, they released funding for us to be able to give licenses to all of the restaurants for 2021. No restaurant in Colorado paid a license fee for 2021. So that's one way we could help out their community, the industry, in relation to that. Significant change happened in January 1 of 2020. January 1 of 2020, we had legislation that got put into place that basically we incorporated pervasiveness into the overall inspection process and have assigned points to all of the violations in the food code. So the pervasiveness aspect of that is we look at the in, out, NA, and NO on our inspection forms. But if an item is marked out, we're then going to look at how pervasive that violation is, or to the extent of what that violation might be. Great example I can give with that is, let's say, a cold holding violation, that maybe you just have a carafe of coffee creamer, a milk sitting out on the counter, and it's 50 degrees, 55 degrees, would be a cold holding violation. Much different than a cold holding violation if you go in and the entire walk-in is out. So there would be an example of where we do a low, medium, and high, and have points associated with that in relation to our inspections. We then look at the overall point score, and if they score less than a 49 on their inspection report, they are good to go. Regardless of what that violation is, we do not do follow-up inspections on singular violations as defined by the statute. If there is something that a local agency wanted to follow up on, they could, but not by statute. If they score above 50, that will require a full reinspection to be done on the facility. So they would then need a full reinspection to be done at that facility. And if they have 3 reinspections in a row, that facility is immediate closure. If they score above 110 points, we call that an imminent health hazard, and that would also require closure. So really what we're doing, if we have applied our risk-based inspection methodology and looked at how active do they manage the risks themselves within their facility. If they're doing a good job and maybe only have a few violations, those risks would be indicated by a low score, a low pervasiveness overall, and we would call that a good inspection. If they don't have good control over those risks, we're able to focus our time and our resources on those bad operators rather than chasing those one-off violations out there when we're doing inspections. So it's really a good risk-based inspection that we're doing to assess the active managerial control within those facilities. So another element, like I mentioned, if it's above 110 points, that is also immediate closure. The statute defines that we cannot keep a facility closed for an indefinite period of time. We have a very defined period that they can be closed. Typically, they're closed, and then maybe after 1 meal service, they would have had the education, they would have made adjustments or corrections that we can go in and do an inspection or look at their training that maybe they had gotten online to allow them to reopen. And then once they're operating again, we would do another full reinspection on that facility to see if they have in fact gotten that active managerial control back into place. That is really the biggest and most exciting thing that we've had done. I'm not familiar with other states that have incorporated that. It does pose some problems with us when it comes to standard 3, when I talk about individual violations, risk factors that may be out, that if you score less than 50 and have demonstrated to us overall you're doing a good job, we are going to ask that those get corrected, but we are not necessarily going to have a follow-up on that particular item. So up to this point, the inspections that have been conducted, the feedback that we've received from local agencies that are using this has been very positive. We don't keep having to go down that enforcement path for reinspect after reinspect after, or a follow-up after follow-up after follow-up, and that documentation related to that. So that is all that I have for everyone. And thank you very much, Travis, for then go ahead and yield the remainder of my time back to the rest of the group.
All right, thank you, Troy. Sorry about the alarm there. I was trying to keep track of time.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Did perfectly. If you guys have any questions, please put it in the chat.
Travis, there is a question for Troy. It's in Pathville. What is considered an imminent health hazard for closure?
So an imminent health hazard for closure, if they scored above 110 points, that would be considered an imminent health hazard. That they had that many points, that many violations at their facility, we would go ahead and do an immediate closure on that. We did redefine imminent health hazard and made it a little bit more broad rather than getting having specificity in that in the statute. We've gone ahead and gotten more specific or broader with that imminent health hazard. If there is a one-off circumstance, then we can't, like there's food temperatures are way off and they really don't have, or the refrigeration is all off and they really don't have a way to bring things down to 41 degrees, even though they maybe don't score that 110 points, we would consider that imminent health hazard. And in fact, Heather went ahead and I think pulled that and put it into the chat. Heather is from one of our local public health agencies. Thank you, Heather.
Oh, great, Heather. One other quick question, just a quick one, Troy. Would something like a vermin infestation be an automatic 100 points?
Oh, it would be an imminent health hazard. It wouldn't be an automatic 100 points, but we would go ahead and consider that, an infestation that would be considered imminent health hazard. Yes.
All right. Any other questions? Please continue to put them in chat. Back to you, Travis.
All right. Thank you, Tracinda. All right. Next up, we have Mark Speltz with the Iowa Department of Inspections and Appeals. Mark, are you on?
I am.
All right, Mark, we'll let you take it away. And remember, we have 5 minutes per presentation.
All right, I'll see if I can move it along. Next slide, please.
Thank you.
So first, give an update on our program standards. So this is a map of Iowa, kind of a jurisdictional map as well. So the Department of Inspections and Appeals is the state agency. We currently meet 8 out of 9 standards. We do not meet standard 8 at this point, but we also have 12 total jurisdictions. So 11 local jurisdictions, as well as the Department of Inspections and Appeals. Those counties that you see in blue are directly regulated by the state. Those in white are local agencies. There's also one piece that you can't really see very well, but there is, we do have one municipality, City of Dubuque, and they would be in one of those blue counties there as well. So as it relates to the standards, the accumulation of all 12 jurisdictions in the state of Iowa, we independently meet 67 standards. 100% of all Iowa jurisdictions meet standard 3 and standard 4, and 75%, just over 75% of all jurisdictions also meet 2, 6, and 9. Next slides, please. So on the regulatory front, Iowa is we adopted the 2017 FDA Model Food Code. We do have a couple of amendments. That also includes the supplement to the Food Code 2017. So as up to date as we can be. We did have consumable hemp legislation that passed during the last legislative session. So the department is now in charge of regulating consumable hemp products, both manufacture and retail. We did have that you previously saw in a slide that Julie covered. We have an exemption in place for food stands operated by minors. This year, we also expanded the morel. We had a wild mushroom rule that allowed for morels and oysters only. That was expanded to some additional species. Actually, it goes into effect today. And then one other unique regulatory update. It hasn't affected us to this point, but the state legislature in Iowa did pass a personal delivery device law. So really talking about some of those automated delivery devices that we expect that we will see in the food world relatively soon. So we did keep an eye on that. A few things that are not in place. We talked earlier as far as the Food Freedom Act. We did see 4 separate bills introduced during this legislative session that would have expanded similar to the Food Freedom Act. We did see almost the exact same language come through here in Iowa that Arkansas saw come through as well. We did have some legislation to expand our home bakeries to either take away the $35,000 sales limit altogether, or to expand into many other foods without that kind of sales limit as well. All of those bills essentially did not make it to the floor for a vote. They were all essentially defeated in the committee or subcommittee. Next slide, please. Okay, as far as a training and standardization update, as far as the FDA training courses, FD 215, 218, and 312, something that we've taken great pride in trying to keep all of our people trained in those have those 3 courses, all of our food safety inspection officers. We do have all staff that have been with us for over 2 years have completed all 3 of those, but we have recently added additional staff that need at least one of these courses or all 3. So we're trying to get them all enrolled in the virtual pieces. As far as standardizations, just cover kind of in the last 12 months, our standardization officers have completed 9 initial standardizations, 6 standardization renewals. We did have a couple that have gone past their 36-month due to COVID. Next slide, please. So similar to what some other folks have said, is we kind of avoided the big outbreaks in 2020 as we were dealing with our response to COVID as well. So that was a relief. But what we did encounter on the food emergency kind of side was we had some significant event, or at least one significant event that we responded to. So our Iowa Food Emergency Rapid Response Team did stand up our incident command structure and activate. We responded and did 575 emergency response assessments. Most of those were on site. Some of those were done via phone. We worked with a local health agency, one of our local health agencies that was heavily impacted by the derecho. We were also able to tap into resources with the FDA. They came and did some assist us with some assessments of the food manufacturing as well. So in addition to that, we have also responded to completed over 100 assessments in the last 12 months to smaller events such as localized boil water advisory, localized flooding, fires, sewage backup, those types of things. So it's becoming a larger portion of our, I guess, inspection menu mix, so to speak, is responding to more and more emergencies. That area continues to rise for us. Next slide, please.
So Mark, your time is up.
Yep. Okay.
So I think right now, if we take any questions in the chat.
Okay, that's fine. Yep.
Sorry, it looks like you had some more stuff to go over.
Yeah, Mark, there was just a question. Do the hemp producers, do they have a special permit?
So the Department of Agriculture regulates the plant itself and the growing of the plant. So that's licensed and regulated by the Department of Agriculture. We come in post-harvest when it's going to be put into something that is consumable. And then they would need to register with the state and follow a set of regulations.
Okay. Trisina, do you have any more questions in the chat?
That's it, but continue to ask questions in chat. And Mark, if you'd like to share anything else, please, we may have some time at the end and we can circle back to you, but add whatever you would like in the chat as well.
All right,
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, next up, I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Shafer. She's with the Kansas Department of Agriculture. Elizabeth, are you on?
Hi, yes, I'm on.
All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to give out the state report. So next slide, please. I'm going to talk about the program standards. We had an audit in 2020, and we are in full conformance of all the standards for the manufactured food standards. Next slide. And then for retail standards, just this past summer, as you guys have heard previously, we're now in conformance of all 9 standards. During this current self-assessment period, we will do another full self-assessment at the end of this month because our self-assessment cycle will start again. I would love to go into more detail, but to keep it short, I'll continue. Next slide, please. Legislative updates. We are starting the formal adoption process for the update to the Kansas Food Code. We're basing it on the 2017 FDA Food Code with 2019 supplements. We're really hoping that'll get going. The House Bill 2056 that covers kratom was not passed this session. And then the egg law was removed record keeping requirements for lot consolidation repackaging. Next slide. For COVID, I'll just do a quick, we did do virtual inspections in 2020 as well. We are thankfully back to in-person inspections. And that was definitely a whirlwind. We learned some pros and cons to that, but we got through it. Next slide. For staffing updates, much like everyone else, we've had a lot of turnover. We are blessed to say that right now we are 99% staffed. We only have, I think, 1 vacancy at the current moment, but we do have 4 new inspectors starting on the 20th, I believe. So all in all, we've had 12 new inspectors hired and trained during the last year and a half. We've learned a lot on how to train virtually rather in person. So we've been really flexible and had to adapt quickly for that. We are planning on sending 8 new inspectors to FD 218 and about 10 or more to FD 312 in the next year. We've also had to do a lot more Zoom calls with our staff, whether that's, it used to be weekly, bi-weekly, and then it went to monthly. So we've learned a lot in this time. Next slide, please. And then I'm going to talk about a little bit of the outbreaks. Over the last year and a half, we've had a few. There was one in a restaurant with 6 cases. We had a few that were in correctional facilities, 3 different ones. That was an interesting time. We recently, in the last few weeks, we've had 2 outbreaks at 2 different restaurants. They were in the same town and they're associated with confirmed salmonella cases, but it looks like they're 2 separate clusters. We are still collecting information on these outbreaks. For restaurant 1, produce samples were not found for salmonella. The environmental assessment found pooled eggs being stirred with some possible splashing near produce in the grill make table. All produce in that unit was reported as intended to be cooked, but no other issues with cross-contamination or cooking were seen. And this kind of leads in with our standard 5. We went through the NEARS Explorer program, and so we're going to be utilizing NEARS. We're going to try it out. So that will be our first NEARS upload. And then for restaurant 2, environmental assessment did not find any issues with cross-contamination or cooking. We're waiting on whole genome sequencing of salmonella found in produce products from leftovers. The follow-up produce samples were not found for salmonella, and this will be our second NEARS upload. So we're kind of excited on seeing how those progress. We're still collecting a lot of information for those outbreaks. So
Okay, thank you,
that's all
Elizabeth.
for me.
Oh, perfect timing. Thank you so much. A lot of great information. And again, if people want to put their questions into the chat.
Travis, there was a question for Elizabeth if she felt training. Did you find training virtually better than and in person?
So Tara Jo's our training coordinator. She did reply to him, but she believes that virtual training is not better than in person. Virtual training takes longer. Our normal basic training time frame is 9 weeks now. So she was able to get more detailed training for some special processes that are not always presented in normal training. So I think it just kind of depends on a lot of different factors.
Okay, so my question I put in was, what is the main attribute of the turnover in your state?
That's a great question. I
think we all go through it. So
yeah, I think we all go through it. I think it's, yeah, like Autumn put in the chat, lack of money. I think a lot of times underpaid, overworked. We want people to be really passionate about what they're doing so we can reduce foodborne illness. So I think it's a struggle that we all face.
Okay, yeah. I mean, for us, it's you know, the wage issue, competitive wages. So thank you. Were there any other questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll move on. Thank you, Elizabeth. Next up, we have Travis Splawn with the Oklahoma State Department of Health. Travis, you on?
I am. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, can hear you.
Okay, I'll just give a few updates for our state. I'm with the Oklahoma State Health Department. We also have 2 county health departments at our kind of larger population centers in Oklahoma City and Tulsa. So I'll provide a small update with some of their stuff as well. So if we go to the next slide. So here at the State Health Department, we had some updated work on our retail program standards. We received a 1-year FDA grant that allowed us to set some staff time to work on compliance with the standards. Our primary focus for that grant was program standard 2 and missing written procedures we had. Prior to the grant award, we only had 1 program standard that we had met and had verified, which was program standard number 7. And we had a lot of partial compliance throughout the rest. We used that grant to assign 5 staff, set up weekly meetings, and we worked on creating a couple of databases, 20 different forms, procedures, and checklists that allowed us to come into compliance with some of the standards. So after working on the grant, we did a re-self-assessment. We did those just recently. And it looks like we'll have met program standard 2, 3, and 5 in addition to our program number 7. So that 1 year dedicated time really helped us out on getting that stuff set down on paper and submitted. I know we've had a couple of those already audited, and I believe we just got to turn them in to the FDA now. So, that's the update for the most recent program standards update for Oklahoma. I'll mention our Oklahoma City provided me an update with where they're at on their standards. The Oklahoma City County Health Department is enrolled in the standards separately from the state health department. They currently meet program standard 3, 4, 6, and 7, and they met those in 2019. And I guess standard 6 they met in 2020. Their next plan is to work on program standard 5 and 2. So those are the ones they're planning on meeting next. They gave an update on standardization of their inspectors. They had 3 inspectors standardized in 2020. One was a initial standardization, and one was or 2 of them were a re-standardization. And they had 4 new inspectors began their level 1 training in 2020. I think we're all dealing with that turnover part. And so dealing with new inspectors and getting them trained up is a concern, always important. On the Tulsa side, 2019 through 2021, standards that were assessed and verified was standard 7. That was completed in 2019. And then Tulsa participated in the NACHO cohort mentee program. They were paired with Gwinnett, Newton, and Rockdale County Health Departments in Georgia, and assessed and verified standard 5 and 9. So the risk factor study program in standard 9. Their goals for 21-22 is program standard 2 and 3. They self-standardize in Tulsa, so they had 1 inspector standardized in 2020, 4 inspectors in 2021, 3 were initials and 2 were re-standardizations. It's 6 new inspectors in 2020 and 3 new inspectors in 2021. And they're also implementing an electronic plan review process in Tulsa to kind of help modernize that system. If we can go to the next slide. And I'm trying to keep this quick. We had kind of 2 major legislative updates. We also had a Food Freedom Act. It seems like that's the popular thing to do. It went into effect. It does allow for TCS foods and non-TCS foods to be made from home. Those are uninspected, unlicensed. It allows non-TCS foods to be sold in third-party areas like restaurants, farmers markets, and grocery stores. TCS foods still have to be sold directly. We were able to keep, no meats and poultry, marijuana products, or unpasteurized milk. There's still some labeling requirement, and they increased the sales limit. Previously, prior to this, we had a Home Bakery Act that allowed for non-TCS baked goods with a $20,000 limit. So this was a pretty big expansion. The second related legislation that was passed was a multi-seasonal license for food establishments that allows a seasonal establishment to sell hot beverages in addition to snow cones, and basically allows a seasonal operator to more or less operate year round. This one will be fairly limited in its impact, but it is something that's related to our food standards. I did want to mention our kind of a COVID impact. We had a lot of our food inspectors get pulled in for COVID response. So that kind of really took a hit to our inspections. And during the emergency, the governor declared emergency, we actually waived any late fees for restaurants. I heard someone mention that they had waived their licensing fees. We didn't go that far, but we did waive late fees for the entire duration of the governor's executive order.
Okay, thank you, Travis. So that's your time for now. If we have more time in the end, we can always come back. Sorry.
No, thank you. No, I was nearly done anyway.
Yeah, that's a lot of great information. Thank you. Is there any questions for Travis? Please put them in the chat. Okay. All right. So we're going to move on to our next state. We have 2 presenters for this portion. Joe Williams and Jason Guzman from Texas Department of State Health Services. Joe is up first. So Joe, go ahead and take it away. And again, you have 5 minutes combined between the two of you. So.
Okay, thanks, Travis. Are you going to put our slide up, or am I supposed to do that?
There it
goes. Thank you. Thanks, Travis. And thanks, everyone. Joe Williams with Texas Department of State Health Services, Public Sanitation and Retail Food Safety Branch. So just a few highlights from the last, let's say, year and a half. Our biggest highlight probably has been our revamping of our Texas food establishment rules. It started with a Senate Bill 476 in our 2019 legislative session, which allowed restaurant owners to allow dogs in outdoor dining areas and set certain criteria for that. And so we had to open our rules to bring that into the rules, and that morphed into a change of methodology. And so we've gone from transcribing the biggest part of the FDA food code into our Texas administrative code, simply to adopting by reference the FDA food code with certain exceptions. So our Texas food establishment rules that are in the Texas administrative code have gone from 175 to 200 pages down to about 25 to 30 pages of Texas specific rules, and we'll be using the 2017 FDA food code going forward. This became effective on August the 8th. Our training officer, Jason Guzman, has been and is still continuing to work on posting guidance and crosswalks and training tips on our website, and working with our field staff and with field staff from local health departments. And just an FYI, in Texas, we have on any given day, we have approximately 200 local health jurisdictions across the state in urban areas, counties, public health districts. So our field staff with Texas Department of State Health Services are for the most part in pretty rural areas. With COVID-19, we at least our field staff were pulled from the field fairly early on in the pandemic. There were some opportunities for remote inspections, but like the previous speaker, many, if not most of our field staff were involved in COVID-related activities such as contact tracing, at least for the first several months of the pandemic. On the legislative front, we just finished a legislative session, and we had a farmers market bill, and we had some change in language in our statute, a change in definition of farmers market, and the addition of a definition for food producer. And the upshot of it is that regulatory jurisdictions will no longer be able to limit farmers markets to farmers and farm-related products, and that's per our legislature. They will have to allow temporary food establishment that wants to sell hamburgers and hot dogs, an off-site food manufacturer who wants to bring in wares that are completely unrelated to farm products. So, and that's per our legislature. And then I wanted to mention we had a big expansion of our cottage food bill in the 2019 legislature, and it did allow any product that is not TCS to be sold as a cottage food, and it also allowed canned, fermented, pickled, and acidified foods with some minimum requirements. And of course, those acidified foods would normally fall under 21 CFR 114, but the cottage food bill does not require those producers to go to better process school. They do not have to have every product evaluated by a process authority. The requirements are really minimum. And so now I want to hand it over to Jason Guzman, talk for a moment about the standards.
All right, so we've reached our 5-minute marker.
Oh man, I'm sorry.
If we have time to circle back, we absolutely will. But we could take any questions that the attendees have in the Pathwell chat. And then also, I'd like to direct you guys to the Southwest breakout webpage so you can contact speakers if you want more information as well. But at this point, we got to move on. And Jason, hopefully we can come back and hear what you have to say in regards to your report. So up next is Tim Lane. He's the Retail Food Program Manager for the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food. All right, Tim, are you on?
Yeah, is that better now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Well, yeah, you have to hit the unmute button. Okay, hi everybody, how y'all doing? Thanks, Travis. Go ahead, next slide, please. Okay, progress on the program standards. We've been involved in the program standards for years. When I say years, I want to say 10, 15 years. When they first came out, we were actively involved. Our last program assessment was conducted during 2016. It's been 5 years, so we will be conducting a new assessment during this year to see exactly where we stand with the standards. Next slide, please. Okay, new legislation or rules affecting the program. Last year, 2020, we had the passing of the Homemade Food Act. What this law does is it allows somebody to make food in their home and they can sell it to anybody they want to, but it has to go to the end consumer. They cannot have anybody in between. Okay, under this act, the only meats they can do are chickens that they raise as long as it's less than 1,000 chickens, and rabbits that they raise. Okay, we've also completed the final report. It's being reviewed for the Food Security Task Force. Our plans for the next year, for the next legislative session, is to update our food protection rule and our cottage food rule. Next slide, please. Training and standardization. Well, right now we just have one person standardized. I do have plans to standardize 7 other state inspectors within the next 9 months. Think I can do it? We'll see. Next slide, please. Other areas of interest, we have a very proactive recall response program. When products are confirmed to be in Utah, we do audits at those facilities to ensure that the product has been removed from sale. You'd be surprised how many products we find that have not been pulled from sale. And we also have a rapid response team. This team conducted traceback training that involved inspectors and epidemiologists across the state, and the Food Safety Task Force and Rapid Response Team will be hosting a food safety conference in the spring of 2022. Next slide, please. Major obstacles to overcome. We need to improve our compensation package. Currently, we are serving as a training source with numerous employees leaving for better paying positions after getting their license. Just this year, we've lost 7 people. We currently have 4 new employees in training, and we're in the process of hiring 2 more. I believe that's all the slides I have. Travis, back to you.
Thanks, Tim. Once again, if you have any questions for Tim, please put it in the chat.
I don't see any. Travis.
Okay. All right, so we'll move on to our next presenter. And here again, we have another Utah. This time it's Karl Hart with the Utah Department of Health. Karl, are you on?
Yes, I'm on.
All right, take it away.
Okay, so I'll be speaking on the those things that affect food safety regarding the Utah Department of Health. Please advance the next slide. So we'll start with program standards. The Department of Health completed its 3rd self-assessment in 2020, and we still meet standards 1, 2, and 7. Verification audit was completed in 2021, and the 2020 self-assessment revealed that we could meet standards 8 and 9 with focused effort. A 2021 project includes the initial development of a strategy to meet standards 8 and 9 within the next 2 years. There are 13 local health jurisdictions in Utah, and I think 12 of the 13 are enrolled. I was not able to reach out and get an update on those, so in that sometime in the future. Next slide, please. So new legislation or rules affecting the program. Food in Utah, I did touch on this in the previous presentation, but it started with the Agritourism Food Establishment Act in 2020, followed by a rule, and then the Microenterprise Home Kitchen Act in 2021, followed by the rule. So the act requires the department to write the rule, then we write the rule. We have 180 days to complete the rule, which is a really fast turnaround on a new rule, considering that there needs to be involvement with stakeholder partners throughout the whole process. With real challenge to hit that timeline while trying to hit every other goal that we have for our program. So getting back-to-back rules or having back-to-back acts that require rules in 2 years in a row has been a significant challenge. Next slide. Training and standardizing, directly related to what I just said in the previous slide, there are 2 FDA standardized retail food safety inspection officers in Utah. We were able to standardize 2 individuals in 2021. We have plans to standardize 12 others. We're a little behind on standardizing at this point. Doing 12 in 2022 will be a huge challenge, but the reason for the backlog is just the amount of time and effort that we've had to spend on writing those 2 new rules. So we intend to focus on standardizing in the next year. Next slide. Significant foodborne illness outbreaks in Utah in the last year. We had a Vibrio outbreak associated with oysters. Several ill individuals reported consuming raw oysters at the same Salt Lake City restaurant. Oyster tags were collected and implicated an oyster harvest area in Washington State. Sorry to throw shade on Washington State, but we don't have oysters in Utah, so it must have come from somewhere else. Another outbreak, Salmonella enteritidis, associated with undercooked chicken. A small town held a community celebration where a food vendor served undercooked chicken. 87 individuals were reported ill, and 15 of them were positive for the same strain of Salmonella. And then lastly, we had a Norovirus outbreak associated with an ill food handler. 2 fast food restaurants had Norovirus outbreaks within 2 weeks of each other. It was determined that a single ill food handler worked at both restaurants and had likely spread the illness from restaurant A to restaurant B. So we had our own version of a typhoid Larry situation here in Utah. Next slide, please. Other areas of interest regarding food protection and food safety in Utah. We may see new legislation in 2022 regarding the way food handler training and permitting is handled in Utah. There have been some complaints just about how inefficient it is. So there may be something in the works. Utah Department of Agriculture and Food has a proactive recall response program. When products are confirmed to be when products are confirmed that need to be recalled, audits are performed to ensure the product has been removed for sale. There's an active food safety task force in Utah and meets 2 or 3 times per year. And the grant was applied for and received by Department of Ag and will be continually used for education and outreach. And then there's also a Utah Rapid Response Team, which just recently finished conducting the ER-220 traceback training that involved inspectors and epidemiologists throughout Utah. And we'll be holding a food safety conference in the spring of 2022. Next slide. Major obstacles that need to be overcome, as alluded to in my previous presentation, the food freedom movement and other local pro-business movements have taken root in the state and continue to lobby against food safety regulation, especially the requirement to be permitted and inspected according to the standards and requirements of existing law. One other major obstacle to overcome is, as has been said by several others, the COVID pandemic. Initially, as a result of it, many of our local health departments had to pull their staff off regular duties for the first several months for contact tracing, and then they were pulled to staff vaccine clinics for many months after that. Some have only just been getting back to regular duties in the past few months. So it's been a long time being pulled off of regular duties. And that's all I have, Travis.
Great, thank you, Karl. So I got a question back to me about the salary discrepancy that we have in this state. One thing that we're working on is working with the governor's office and the legislature to do a salary survey. And I don't know if this is going to be offensive or anything, but we've asked them to use states that are comparable to us and not other states that might be located more in the southeast as a measuring point. So we are actively looking at that. We estimate that it costs us around $90,000 to $100,000 over the course of 2 years to train people, only to have them leave for higher paying jobs. So it's a problem. Okay, so what we'd like to do at this point is circle back to those folks who got cut off by me and give them an opportunity to kind of finish up what they weren't able to get through. So we'll start back at the top with Arkansas. And I think we'll give each person at least 2 minutes to kind of finish up what they had started. So Arkansas.
I had finished with my presentation, so I'd be available for any questions that anybody has.
Okay. Okay, so we'll skip on down the list. Colorado. Troy, did you have anything else?
No, I responded back to several of the questions in the chat, and a couple of other local agencies in Colorado has helped me out a little bit to respond also. So thank you for that.
All right.
And no, I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark with Iowa.
Yeah, I just had a couple slides left, but I wanted to cover just a couple of things. So
Sure.
you mentioned that we activated our rapid response team for the derecho. We also activated again this year for RAGBRAI, which is the Bike Ride Across Iowa. So if you're interested in knowing what that is, you can search RAGBRAI, but that is a multi-jurisdictional effort. So we stood up our ICS and managed that this year, and it was quite a success on our end. Otherwise, I just wanted to touch base on some of the challenges and trends that we're seeing. We see our complaints are increasing, specifically complaints about unlicensed facilities, We see an increased specialized processes at retail. We're seeing now a resurgence of temporary food events and an increase in emergency responses. So those are all things that impact our workload, but don't provide additional revenue. Challenges that we faced are, protecting staff during the pandemic, the issue of mental health related to our employees. We're using an aging data system. So one of our things moving forward is to continue to work with AFDO and other USA Food Safety user states to develop and implement Shafer, system for agriculture, health, food, and e-inspections. And so that's one of our big things moving forward. We've just filled our final vacancy for our inspection staff, and we're all continuing to adjust to the virtual environment. That's it. Thanks.
Great. Hey, thank you so much. All right, Elizabeth, did you have anything further to add?
I did not.
Okay. Travis, with Oklahoma, did you have any items?
Yeah, I had just one or two things. I wanted to mention, I put it in the chat that Oklahoma State Health Department is also enrolled in the manufactured program standards. We had been unenrolled from that for a little while, and so we're getting back into that. So that process has started. And then I wanted to mention that we had an update that recently just went into effect where we had updated our food code to more closely match the 2019 FDA model food code. So I think those were the last two items I really wanted to mention.
Great. Okay. So at this point, Jason Guzman, my friend, I'm sorry that you got cut off. If you'd like to continue presenting your presentation.
Sure. It was just the last bullet point there, Travis. So just the retail program standards and standardization. As Joe kind of mentioned previously, with the state of Texas, we're a home rule state. So standardization specifically to DSHS, unfortunately took a bit of a halt due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, some of the other state municipalities and public health districts enrolled in the standards were able to have some movement. Unfortunately, due to some of our travel restrictions, standardizations specifically from the State Department to local health programs, really none were performed during the COVID pandemic. And as we're seeing, a rise in the Delta, we're kind of staying on course with some of our travel restrictions. So due to that, we're going to have a little bit of a backlog created by COVID-19. As we also get into our new budget year, we're foreseeing some reduction in travel resources as well. So we've been brainstorming with the FDA, our retail food specialist, about how can we get some of these local programs that are waiting on the standardization from DSHS back into compliance with Standard 2, specifically with those standardizations of training officers. So we're working kind of on a draft question for the retail program standards clearinghouse work group. Basically, the general idea is possibly seeing how we can maybe use a web-based platform to provide, DSHS, if not FDA, training and resources for Standard 2. Also to include maybe some training on how the standardization process works for those training officers with the local health programs. But the idea is, since we're limited in travel and removing our physical presence from that initial and restandardization process of those training officers, can they still be in line to meet that Standard 2? So, that's kind of the intent of the question we're getting ready to kind of draft for the clearinghouse work group. And hopefully, best case scenario, it still meets that intent. And these guys aren't waiting on the state program to get out there. And if they are able to get back in the field, they can start those standardization processes with this webinar training that we would be able to provide to them. That's all I had, Travis. Thanks again.
All right, great. Thank you. Appreciate everybody's presentation today. Great job, guys. It seems like we have a lot of the same issues or had a lot of the same experiences recently with turnover and COVID and whatnot. But what amazed me is how resilient people have been to adapt. And then also I'd like to mention, at the beginning of the program here, Tracinda mentioned the last in-person meeting we had was here in Salt Lake City in 2019. That meeting was in conjunction with the Western Association of Food and Drug Officials and also our local Environmental Health Association. So as you can imagine, it was a tremendous effort to organize that, but we had a lot of great help. And we're looking forward to doing another in-person meeting again, not here in Salt Lake, but what I'm asking you is for you guys to consider hosting a meeting for 22. There's a lot of work that goes into it, but I think there's a lot of experience out there with the states who have put on these meetings, and we are always available to answer questions or help out in that regard. So give it some consideration. And then also I'd like to recognize Sherri Woodus from Arkansas, the effort she put in for the 2020 conference, only to have it canceled. I'd just like to recognize her for her efforts. And maybe she'll reconsider. Maybe she has some stuff still in place and would want to revisit that possibility. So that's all I have to say. At this point, I'll turn it back over to Jacinda.
Thank you so much, Travis.